Would you trust a surgeon with your life? Mike clearly did. He put his faith in the health practitioner's hands, believing the whole thing would move smoothly as he and his wife prepared to welcome their first baby into the world. But what became imagined to be the happiest day in their lives quickly became a waking nightmare, one that might hang out with them forever. This is Mike's tale, a harrowing tale of a botched C-section that left his spouse fighting for her existence and their newborn baby at threat. It all started with so much hope. Mike and his spouse were eagerly expecting the birth of their baby, meticulously planning every detail of the nursery, attending birthing training, and dreaming of the instant they could sooner or later maintain their baby. Being pregnant was by and large uneventful until the last few weeks when the docs observed symptoms of fetal distress. They have been told that a C-section would be the safest option for each mother and baby. The doctor reassured them, announcing it became a recurring manner, something that they had completed infinite times earlier. But here's the component of approximately routine surgeries. They aren't recurring when something is going wrong. The day of the surgery arrived, and the air turned thick with anticipation. Mike held his wife's hand as they wheeled her into the operating room. He tried to live calmly, whispering phrases of encouragement because the scientific group organized the method. But beneath his brave face, a gnawing sense of unease started to creep in. What if something went wrong? Mike pushed those thoughts apart. The health practitioner had promised them that everything might be exceptional. But as the minutes ticked using, his worst fears commenced to take form. The surgical procedure commenced like another. The health practitioner made the primary incision. However, something turned off. The cut becomes too deep, and the perspective is wrong. Mike didn't know it at the time, however. That initial mistake prompted a chain reaction of mistakes that might spiral out of management. The surgeon, seeking to correct his mistake, made every other incision, this time too shallow, slicing into muscle tissue that should have been left untouched. Mike observed the tension in the room, the moved quickly a few of the group of workers, the surprising increase in beeping monitors. But he was helpless, trapped in a sterile white room wherein his worst nightmare was unfolding properly in front of him. And then it passed off. The instant everything went to hell. The medical doctor's fingers slipped, severing a vital artery. Blood began pouring out, an excessive amount of too fast. Mike's spouse's face went light, her eyes huge with terror because the clinical crew scrambled to stop the bleeding. The room that had once been filled with quiet self-assurance became now a flurry of panic. Every second felt like an eternity as they labored desperately to stabilize her. But the damage had already been achieved. Excessive bleeding becomes most effective in the beginning. In the chaos, the crew did not properly reveal her essential signs and symptoms. Her blood pressure plummeted, her coronary heart fee spiked, and yet the focus turned totally on the incision, patching up what they had damaged, even as ignoring the frame they were purported to be saved. Mike became compelled to watch, powerless, as his wife's existence hung inside the stability. And then, as if this horror display needed some other twist, the baby's heart charge started to drop. The room that had been bustling with frantic power all of a sudden went quiet. Mike ought to only hear the sound of his heartbeat, pounding in his chest as he realized that each of his wife and their baby had been slipping away. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the baby was brought. But the relaxation becomes quick-lived. The infant wasn't breathing. The medical crew rushed to restore the newborn, operating feverishly as Mike stood frozen in disbelief. How had everything long passed so wrong? The infant took its first breath, but it was susceptible, fragile, just like their destiny had all of a sudden come to be. Meanwhile, Mike's wife changed a long way from being stable. The incision site had become infected, a recognized hazard when surgical protocols are not noted. But this wasn't just any contamination. This became something a good deal worse, something that might require multiple surgical procedures to fix, something that might rob them of the pleasure of parenthood and update it with worry, anger, and overwhelming grief. Days became weeks, and Mike's wife remained in the hospital. The infection had spread, and with each passing day, the medical doctor's reassurances felt more and more whole. What had as soon as been a promise of an easy, secure system had become a constant war for her life. And the baby? The baby who was alleged to be mild in their lives now confronted an unsure destiny. The loss of oxygen at some stage in the botched transport supposed there might be long-term developmental problems, an ever-gift shadow over what should be a joyous time. The body pain was unbearable, however. It turned into nothing compared to the emotional and psychological toll. Mike and his spouse have been robbed of the happiness that a new mother and father must sense. Instead of late-night time feedings and first smiles, they had been faced with sleepless nights full of tension, worry, and regret. The trauma of the surgical treatment haunted them each, replaying over and over in their minds like a twisted loop from which there had been no breakout. And then there has been the financial burden. As if the emotional and physical toll weren't sufficient, Mike and his wife were quickly confronted with the financial devastation that accompanied the botched C-section. The extra surgeries, extended health center stay, and ongoing hospital therapy led to a mountain of scientific bills that quickly beat the couple. The prices have been astronomical, some distance beyond what their insurance would cover, leaving them to pay out of pocket for tons of the care. The financial burden delivered but any other layer of pressure to their already fragile state of affairs. Mike was determined, himself suffering to keep up with the mounting payments while also being concerned for his wife and new child. The pressure of their dire financial situation weighed heavily on him, in addition to straining his intellectual and emotional health. In a try and cover the fees, Mike was pressured to tackle additional work, leaving him with little time to spend with his convalescing spouse and new child infant. The pressure of imparting for his own family when coping with the aftermath of the surgical treatment became unbearable, pushing him to the brink of exhaustion and despair. But the worst element? The moment Mike found out that this horror could have been prevented. He observed out later, after speaking with different medical doctors, that the mistakes made all through his wife's C-section were totally avoidable. Improper incision techniques, failure to monitor her important signs, negligence that brought about the infection. All of it can have been avoided with right care, with a medical doctor who became paying attention, who wasn't too arrogant or too distracted to take the necessary precautions. This awareness driven Mike to searching for justice. The greater Mike found out approximately what had long passed wrong in the course of the surgical treatment, the extra he found out that what had occurred to his own family changed into no longer just a tragic accident. It became a case of blatant clinical negligence. Determined to or trying to find justice for his wife and baby, Mike decided to pursue prison action in opposition to the clinic and the surgical team liable for the botched C-section. But the street to justice changed into now not an easy one. The medical institution, armed with a team of excessive-powered legal professionals, fought back aggressively, denying any wrongdoing and attempting to shift the blame onto Mike's spouse, claiming that her pre-current fitness situations have been accountable for the headaches. The prison warfare dragged on for months, and not using an end in sight, as Mike fought to keep those accountable answerable for the devastation they'd caused. The strain of the criminal war best added to the couple's already overwhelming burden. The method was emotionally draining, forcing them to relive the trauma of the surgical procedure time and again once more as they organized their case. The health centers tries to discredit them and downplay the severity of the botched surgical procedure simplest added to their sense of injustice and frustration. The road to healing for Mike and his family changed into lengthy and exhausting. The bodily scars from the surgical operation finally healed, but the emotional and mental wounds remained raw and painful. Mike's wife, with the help of therapy and aid organizations, slowly commenced to rebuild her life. However, the trauma of the botched C-section might by no means absolutely fade. For Mike, the adventure turned into equally challenging. The as soon as happy and positive man turned into now burdened with guilt, anger, and a deep feel of loss. He struggled to come back to terms with what had happened, grappling with the reality that his family's life would by no means be the equal again. But amid the darkness, there have been moments of light. The couple's love for his or her baby, in spite of the demanding situations they confronted, became a source of power and resilience. They learned to cherish the small victories, the baby's first smile, the primary steps, the moments of laughter and pleasure that broke through the cloud of sorrow. But how do you move on from something like this? How do you consider medical doctors once more when those you relied on maximum almost took the whole thing from you? Mike's story is not only a cautionary story, it's a take heed call. Surgical approaches, regardless of how ordinary they'll seem, come with dangers. And when those dangers become fact, the consequences may be devastating. Mike's spouse survived the botched C-section, but she will be able to in no way be the identical. Their child survived, but they will in no way know if the errors made that day will have lasting effects. And Mike? He will in no way overlook the horror of watching the humans he loved most suffer because of a person else's carelessness. So, the subsequent time you're instructed that surgical treatment is recurring, think of Mike's tale. Think of the errors that had been made, the lives that were almost misplaced, and ask yourself, is it truly really worth the hazard? In the end, this is greater than just a story approximately a botched surgical procedure. It's approximately the human price of medical negligence, the lives that are forever modified with the aid of decisions made inside the blink of a watch. Mike and his spouse will never get again what they lost that day. But they could share their story, warn others, and with any luck, save you this nightmare from occurring to a person else. Would you trust a surgeon with your life now? Let us know in the comments below. And before you go, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real-life medical horror stories. Thanks for watching, and remember, some mistakes can never be undone. Goodbye for now.